Da-na-na-na-na. Yes, we're live. It's Tuesday morning. It is just after 6 o'clock, and we have got Lebang. She's still alive. She's still with us. She's still just a singular unit. There's still no baby. We've been preparing for the last how many weeks now? We actually had a meeting about this last week. Simpiwe and Dari and I. We're like, I wonder when it's going to happen. When Lebang's going to phone us at like 7 o'clock at night or at 5 in the morning and suddenly say, ooh, listen, there's some exciting shit going down. So she's very much still with us. And this morning, we are joined by Mash from our studios in Johannesburg. Mash has been interning with us for a whole long time, and we thought it was about time now to introduce you to him. How you doing, Mash?
Hi, nice to see you. I'm good. How are you?
I'm good. All right, so let's spend a little bit of time getting to know you, because people don't know you on the show, and they may have encountered you if they've actually been to the office, but that's like 5% of the people. So why don't you tell us a little bit about yourself? What have you been up to, and what's been happening to you at Cliff Central in the last couple of weeks?
Well, a bit about myself. First of all, I do quite a lot. There's pretty much nothing that I don't do. Right. From marketing stuff, from IT stuff, I'm basically just everything to everyone. That's basically what I am in layman's terms.
He's a fixer.
I'm a fixer. Yeah, that's pretty much what I do. And yeah, Cliff Central, I've just been doing quite a lot as well. I'm sure people have seen me on the TikToks as well, just doing some dances, just having some fun there. And yeah, that's pretty much me there.
All right. Well, I mean, listen, that's where if anyone has seen you, it would have been on TikTok. Are you the one who's behind all these dances, or is it Simpiwe? I mean, tell the truth.
It is Aaron, actually, surprisingly.
Yeah, it's Aaron.
Yeah, he's the one who loves dancing.
He's always in the front.
He's always in the front. And I mean, if you just check his TikToks, he's just dancing all the time. He's dancing in the bathrooms, dancing everywhere.
That's true. And he puts on a lot of the stuff that, especially over weekends, we see some stuff happening there. And it's very much his brainchild. Huh?
It is. It definitely is. My content is more on the... my content is a bit complicated because I am more of a bit of everything kind of dude. So my content is more satirical. It's more laid back. It's more, I'd say, a bit of research goes into it. I mean, if you go on my TikTok, you'll see that I actually post a lot of fun, laid back stuff. I post a lot of...
Where are you from, though? Tell us like a little bit about your background. Like, where did you grow up, and what's the story?
Like, I've grew up in Free State in Kwakwa. So
no one will hold that against you. We've had Kwakwa people on here before, so that's an amazing place. By the way, if you've never been to Kwakwa, it is huge.
It is a huge place.
It is really, really enormous, and you only know that once you've actually driven through it or in it.
That is true.
It's enormous, right?
Yes, and then when you meet people from Kwakwa, it's always crazy in Johannesburg because I always run into people from there. The crazy thing is whenever I speak, people know immediately I'm from there. There was one time I was at the money market. I was trying to withdraw some money. I have to give this lady a code. I'm telling her the code 573. She's like, you're from Kwakwa, ne? Only Kwakwa people say 3 like that.
Is that how you can tell?
That is how you can tell. That 3, the way we say the letter R, as to people from Kwakwa specifically, you can immediately tell where we're from. But then after Kwakwa, I grew up. I came here to the big city, and I moved to this other place. My first apartment in the big city was very odd, to say the least, because it was a very small apartment. It was a bachelor, and the walls were pretty much made of cardboard. And it was actually drywalling, but I call it cardboard because there's no difference there.
Which means you can hear everything that's going on in the room next door.
Everything, whether you want to or not, you can hear pretty much everything.
And there's no such thing as privacy in a place like that.
There is no such thing. I mean, I knew I had to move when I sneezed and I heard "bless you" from next door. That's when I knew it's time to go.
If that ain't a sign, I don't know what is.
Yeah, I mean, I heard many other things, but that's just PTSD. I don't want to relive that.
That's wild, man.
Yeah, so
Carl says, I was told that Mash grew up on a farm in Ireland and was beaten a lot. Tachlejo says, quack, quack. Oh, hey, I am from there. That's home. Ha, ha, ha. Okay.
Yeah, Kwakwa is lots of fun, but it's also really cold. So that's why us people from Kwakwa, we never get cold generally.
No, you guys, because it's that Free State cold that we've spoken about sometimes on the show, and there's nothing in the whole world like a Free State cold. When it's cold there, it's fucking in your bones cold. I just got to say this too. Today is the 21st, so it's winter solstice, which means it's supposedly the shortest day of the year, longest night of the year. Although, if you tell me, I always feel like I'm not getting enough sleep, even in the longest night of the year, right, Lebang?
Yeah, 100%. I was like, winter solstice, really? No, could have fooled me.
Yeah.
It just feels like
this night did feel. Yeah, this night did feel quite long because I actually set like six alarms, and each one rang and rang and rang, and I was like, it's still not even 5 yet. It's still it just felt like it wasn't ending. The night just didn't want to end.
Well, I mean, it's finally if once we're through this, then supposedly, that it starts getting warmer again. Although I don't know, because when you talk to me about July and August, those are the worst ones for me. The rest I can handle. June is never as bad as July. Anyway, we're not going to get into a discussion of the weather, even though that is what a lot of people are talking about at the moment. The interesting thing about this, and whether or not you are a big fan of this information, it turns out that the shortest the night, the June solstice, the longest night, rather, shortest day. Also, these are some interesting info, some interesting little bits and pieces. So, on the June solstice, the sun is directly on the Tropic of Cancer, which is 23.5 degrees north latitude at noon. At the equator, the day is always 12 hours long. The equator, the sun rises at 6 and sets at 6, no matter what. That's why it's good to be at the equator. You get the best of both worlds. Then in the Antarctic, this is scary. There's the Antarctic Circle, right? The sun only makes a brief appearance at noon, peaking at the horizon and then instantaneously disappearing. All areas south of the Antarctic Circle are dark on the June solstice. They don't even get any sun.
That's crazy.
Yeah. And at the South Pole, it has been dark for 3 months already by June 21st.
Let it go. 3 months of no sunshine. I am moving, honey.
Can you imagine?
There's nothing for you there.
That was sent to me by someone called Bianca who listens to us, and she thought that was useful information for us to have this morning. Ugly. For a country whose weather isn't even mild, it's lemon and herb, we spend a lot of time complaining. That's true, but as we've also discussed before, we're not equipped for a very cold winter in South Africa. We don't. I mean, maybe you guys are in Kwakwa, but like here in Johannesburg, we're not. I think people are used to summer, and we prepare for summer, and most of us spend our time outside. We don't spend our time inside, so we don't have like insulation and double glazing and all the stuff that they have in very cold countries. So I think that's part of the reason that we do that. All right, so apparently it is going to snow this weekend, according to Goldashik. Yes. Are you up? Are you ready for that?
I heard that.
It's about time.
The security guard at my son's school, literally every morning, like this week, yesterday, I drove my kids to school. He's like, prepare yourself, Thursday, it's going to be snowing. I was like, yeah, cool story, bro. And I'm like, oh, crap.
Yeah.
It's going to snow this weekend. Crap. I need to really prep for that. It could be really fun.
It could be really fun.
How like snow, when you say snow to kids, they think, oh, America, Santa Claus, like this knee deep of snow that they're going to sit in. And we never really get that. We just get like little shrivels of it every other year if it's cold enough, So I don't even want to bring it up with any of my kids. Like they shouldn't know that there's a possibility, because their expectations versus what's going to happen, I don't want to deal with that.
Well, yeah, that's exactly right. Because when we were kids and we were at school, we used to have to. We wished and we hoped and we prayed that it would snow, because we thought, oh, it'll be so exciting. We build snowmen and it'll be like in the movies. And then there was one occasion where there was a little bit of, I suppose it was sleet. It wasn't even snow. And it was so depressing because it was like this just very, very cold, icy shit on the ground. It wasn't like little snowflakes falling or any of that romantic shit that they show you,
Yeah, it's pretty played out. I think like they just make it look so sexy and so fancy. And then when you see it, you're like, oh, Cool story.
In Kotwa is just another Tuesday, so snow is very common there.
All right, so here he is. That's your full name is Mashiane Sefut, right?
Yes, that's my full name.
There we go. Very good.
Now, somebody was asking for your pronouns in the comments. I think it's
someone
fair that we
we're a very progressive show. Yeah, what are your pronouns so that we can get this right?
My pronouns are him, he's, and he.
All right, there we go. You got to say that these days, right? Otherwise, you
have
left
to be
behind.
politically correct. Yeah,
Very important.
Crazy times.
I did a funny thing over the weekend. It was Father's Day on Sunday, so my sister and I were with my dad, and we taught him about Apple Music, which he never knew about that before. He had this crappy old iPod, which I must have given him, I don't know, 15 years ago. Remember when iPods were a thing? It was one of those little, remember those little square ones?
The shuffles.
With the wheel, the shuffle. That's what it's called. So he had one of these, and somehow this thing was still working, and it had like 120 of these terrible songs that he likes on there. And that was what he was coping with for, I don't know, 15 years? Must have been, maybe 12, but certainly not less than that. And my sister said, look, it's time we get you into the future, into the year 2022 at least. So we're going to help you with this. So my dad's like, yeah, cool. But as long as it's not too complicated. And of course, it's always too complicated because you got to figure this stuff out. And so we got it right, and we had to create a whole thing for him. So you have to create the Apple account. Then you tell him that you're going to charge him money every month, and he's not happy with that, right?
Oh boy,
not happy at all. So he's like, what do you mean? It's going to cost me money. What is this? So we're like, no, but it's very little. I said to him, think about how much music there is. There's all the music you've ever wanted in the whole world on this one device. It's going to be amazing. And he goes, well, I suppose. I'm like, 60 Rand a month. It's a lot of money, but it's not that much money. Come on, let's do it. So he's like, all right, fine. So we set this thing up. He spent about 3 hours on Sunday just finding songs. And it's amazing. Even my dad, who's like in his 60s, approaching his 70s, he's like, I can figure this out. It was amazing. You leave him alone on Apple Music, and he's adding songs, and he's listening to old music, and he's finding stuff he cares about. It was actually quite cool to see, because we often think, our parents are stupid and they won't figure this stuff out. But it was cool that he not only figured it out, but now he's all over it. He's like, this is great. I love Apple Music. I'm downloading music for the rest of the year. And he's finding all the songs he likes. And then I said to him, this thing's going to suggest music to you that you might not have heard for a long time. He's like, yes, okay, cool. But he's open-minded about it. So I suppose that's why it works. If you go in with the attitude that this thing's going to be a disaster, then it will be. Right?
That's nice of you.
Yeah. In most cases, especially with the older generation, I've noticed, it's just about them actually trying something out. You have to force it down their throat. If you tell them about it, they're never gonna be sold on it. They're ever gonna be sold.
I think that's right. And how's that different to us, for example? I mean, when we have to learn about something new, it's not always easy. It's not always something that you can do well. Something you have to figure out. It takes time sometimes. And anyway, for my dad, that was quite fun. And I just think we mustn't give up on people just because it's not immediately obvious to them how to use these things. Isn't that right?
Yeah. Absolutely. But they must also show effort, man. Like it's exhausting when like they come to you for the same thing every week. Please, can you restart my phone? Please, can you da-da-da-da-da? And I'm like, I showed you this last week. I can show you 3 more times, but after that, you are literally on your own. Like there's a bit of like you have to want to do this. I can't keep, like spoon feeding you how to press the on and off button. The fact that your dad is down with Apple Music is really dope. I think I've drawn the line with my mother when it comes to phones. Like YouTube is the hill that she's willing to die on. There's nothing else.
Right.
There's like her emails, they just come in. She does nothing. She doesn't open anything. I think she recently learned how to do WhatsApp stories. So now we're being bombarded, which is cute, but that's it. Nothing else. And that's fine.
What is your mom bombarding you guys with on WhatsApp stories?
Yeah. Dude, you can guess those good morning graphics, those terrible
shame, man.
fonts, and the flowers in the back. And it's like 1 minute voice notes of like church sermons or whatever, which is fine. Like it's, these videos of little Asian girls holding their hands in prayer. And look, I don't know where she gets the stuff.
Yeah,
it's like a group of
it's
aunties.
the typical mom.
Yeah, I mean, all moms do a couple of things, right? Like they send those gifts that they find, because they find those pretty quickly with like the smiley faces or the sunrise or any of those things. They like that stuff. All moms like that stuff. They also will randomly send you a picture of something which is really out of focus, and kind of, because the photography thing only for a few moms is that like an obvious thing that they can do with ease, So there are a couple of things you just have to get used to. But it was cool to see that people can learn this technology. You see it with kids. I mean, Lebang, you must have seen it with yours. No matter how old they are, you give them one of these devices, and very quickly they figure it all out.
No, 100%.
Yeah.
And
One thing my mom
they get better at it than you. Like literally, my 2-year-old is a genius. She fixes my phone for me, and I don't know how, I don't know where, but that's just because they spend so much time on these devices. Right. They learn them.
Yeah, my mom. One thing she shares a lot of is fake news, so I had to block her. But
like what kind of fake news? Does she like tell you about violence that's going to break out somewhere and you must be careful?
It's always like these apocalyptic things that she shares a lot of. That next week the country's going to burn. Oh, you must buy lots of toilet paper. She shares that kind of stuff a lot, and it gets so tiring. So I actually had to block her. I unblock her perhaps on weekend sometimes, or when she calls. But then she never uses WhatsApp anyway, so she just calls me if she needs me. Oh, so it's very convenient for me.
No, my mom's like big on WhatsApp now. So that's her thing now, and she's got all her friends on WhatsApp as well, and she changes her profile picture and all of that stuff.
But, she's in.
Oh no, she knows it. She knows that.
She's a WhatsApp influencer.
But thank goodness. I mean, the one thing that they don't do is social media. So I'm very relieved that my parents.
You'd be surprised though, because lots of moms are on TikTok. TikTok is full of moms.
Yes.
All the moms are there, and they're the ones trending more than everyone else. I follow like
Gareth.
30 moms.
And they literally they're doing the most. They're just doing God's work. They're just in there shouting at their kids. They're just in there complaining about their kids. They're just being typical moms. And what do we love? We love relatable content. So we sit there and we eat it up, because it's like, oh yeah, I totally got shut on like that growing up. Okay. Mothers are killing it on TikTok.
Good, let them do it. I'm all for it. If there's a mom somewhere who's figuring this stuff out and creating great content, go for it. I mean, who knows? We may discover the next big thing, right? I mean, it might not be the people you think it is. It might be moms.
Absolutely.
That wouldn't be the weirdest thing that's ever happened, would it?
It wouldn't at all. It wouldn't.
So here, this is interesting. A couple of points here. First of all, I told my dad, this is Carl, he says that the USBs with the Apple logo on them is Apple Music. He was excited to get away from CDs. You are very cruel.
Carl.
Yeah. Then, hey guys, don't forget one thing. Us oldies were the ones that actually invented and perfected this tech you're using today. Be thankful, says Angus. That's a good point. I mean, we think our parents are dumb and they don't understand this stuff, but it was their generation who did figure it out. Michael says, what's worse is old ones that think they know everything and have no idea. My mom has a laptop and a cell phone. They change at least twice a year, and viruses and apps are on overload. Well, yeah, listen, not everybody's good at this, like we said. Sanele says, Rebel, it's enough here. It doesn't end with the facing. Glass is also important. I have nothing but glass doors. Okay, that's to do with the weather. Sanele is talking about the weather there. Most of those moms on TikTok are young 20s, single mamas living with their folks. Is that true?
No.
Nope. These are literally like 40, 45, maybe even 55, 60. These are our mothers. They are investing in TikTok. Mama. It's not mothers.
All right.
It's mama. They are literally out there on TikTok living their best lives.
They're doing skincare tutorials, everything.
I wanted to talk about this quickly because Lebang has been, I don't know if you're angry about this or if you're just a little bit disappointed, but your favorite artists keep changing genres and they're not telling you about it. And then suddenly you download their new album, talk about Apple Music, and then suddenly you realize like this person is no longer doing hip hop or R&B. Now they're doing like soul, and you're like, this is not what I signed up for. Who are we talking about here first, so we can understand?
So first and foremost, I am probably one of the biggest Drake fans on planet Earth. I've been a huge fan since like his mixtape days for like the past 10, 12 years. He's just been my ride or die. I've just always dug his talent, his ability, his melodies, his flows, his everything. He's just artistic genius. I'm like, oh, Drake, I love you. And so here I am minding my own business like last week. And then I think it was on like the Thursday, and he tweets something like, oh, by the way, tomorrow I'm dropping an album. So I lose my mind. I'm like, oh my God, yes, another album. It's going to be awesome. And then I wait for the album. And then when it comes out, I download it like 61 million other people on this planet, only to hear that it's actually a dance album, which is like, okay, cool. So I am expecting hip hop. If anything, maybe a little bit of pop, because over the years he has evolved like most artists do. So now he's a bit of a pop artist, which I can accept. But now this dude has a full-blown dance album. And by dance, I mean doof, 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 for like 10 or 12 tracks. And like he's singing over them, or like he's... And I'm like, okay, cool.
You go through all the tracks, and then you're like hoping for that one that reminds you of the old Drake, but there's just nothing, and you feel like he's really wasted your time and lied to you.
Well, not wasted my time and lied to me. He's just kind of clearly introducing me to like this new version of him, which is fine. I mean, most of it is produced by Black Coffee, which is cool. Trésor. There's a lot of like South African, like, you know, energy in it, which is nice. It's just a warning would have been fair. I literally was, I think there's like one hip hop song right at the end. So everything else is dance, right?
It's just not what you were expecting. This is like when you bite into what you think is a carrot cake and it ends up being milk tart.
So I can't relate to that because I've never experienced that particularly, but sure. You know, like, something like that, Gareth. I'm not mad at him. I'm not saying, oh, how dare he, but it's just, it was a bit of a shocker for me where, you know, your favorite hip hop artist who's had hit after hit after hit is going to come through and do a whole dance album. I think on one end, it's great because, you know, he's trying new things, he's being experimental. He's maybe like living years ahead of the rest of us. But you know your market. You're an artist. You know what your people want to hear.
And maybe he's just moving into a genre where he can sell more, because Lindy Dooley says Beyonce just released a song a few hours ago. It's also dance.
That's what I'm on.
So maybe there's something going on.
Serious?
Yeah. Sanela says Drake should have just given the whole project to Black Coffee and instead of just 3 tunes. And Mongezi saying, Lebang, Drake should not confine himself to one style of music. He's not just a rapper. He's an all-round musician. So, but I don't think you're criticizing him. I don't think you're saying this is a shitty move.
No, that's
maybe it's a very good
one. Surprise. Yeah, it was just a bit of a shock. And if Beyonce released a few hours ago and it's also dance, then I guess my point is being proven. This is the direction that these artists are going. Maybe the taste of music and people's palate for this kind of stuff is going in the Ibiza route. It can never be me. I will not be caught dead there. I've been to a lot of like deep house events, and I know some deep house artists. It's just there's a way, you know, there's a way that you do it. And I don't think a full-blown album where you're singing on it is the way, but we'll see.
But it also feels to me like Drake has been wanting to do this.
I mean, if you...
I think artists get bored like we do. I think they look at their catalog and they go, well, I want to change it up a little bit. Anyway, look, while we're on this, some headlines. Who was the UK's most played artist of 2021? There'll be no guessing here because this is kind of obvious. If I say he has ginger hair, will that help?
Oh, I thought it was Adele.
Yes.
Ed Sheeran, the most played artist in the UK last year, according to new data from licensing body PPL. The star had the most played song of the year with Bad Habits. It is the 4th time in 5 years that he has been named the UK's most played artist. That's incredible. You know, and you think about this guy, he's like a ugly little dude with this funny color hair and a guitar. And he remember just won that court case where he was accused of stealing Shape of You from somebody. And he won that because the court said, no, that he definitely didn't copy it. His continued success is, and I quote here from the PPL executive Peter Leatham, testament to the quality of his output and the strength of UK music at a time when the global music landscape is more competitive than ever. Do you believe that? Do you think it's more competitive than ever?
I do think it is more competitive than ever because nowadays everybody's coming in strong with so many different genres. I mean, the UK is now also big on South African genres as well. There are UK artists actually experimenting with Amapiano, which is a South African genre too. So I think it's a big deal, and I do buy it.
Funny thing, when I was busy setting up my dad's Apple Music, and my sister, you can't hear me?
I can definitely hear you, Gareth.
Okay. Yeah. No, it's just you then, Mash. So while I was setting up my dad's Apple Music, I saw that they ask you like, what kind of music does he like? You must come back in. So one of the settings is you have to choose like the genre of music that he might like. So I choose oldies, obviously, and then I'm looking at the rest, and one of them is Tom. And I'm like, yeah, I'm going to choose Tom for my dad.
For your dad. A man that has an Apple Shuffle Nano for 15 years. Probably doesn't even know what Tom is.
So I just laughed.
But you must surprise him one day. Just like throw them there as a bit of a span in the works and just see him like react.
So here's a story I want your opinion on. We'll just wait to get Mash back on. But the KZN Health MEC has warned sugar daddies to leave teenage girls alone. This comes from the Health MEC, all right? This is while we were celebrating Youth Day last week. A number of issues plaguing young people, including teenage pregnancies, sexually transmitted diseases, and HIV were on the agenda. Speaking at a 3-day youth conference in the Impapala area, which is in Kandla, on Saturday, the MEC Nomagugu Simelane, she urged young people to keep themselves healthy and ensure that the sacrifices made for freedom, such as the Soweto uprisings, were not in vain. And what does she go to? She said, from recent statistics, 1,300 girls were being infected with HIV every week in this country. That is frightening. While there's a reported 18,550 births by girls aged 10 to 17 in KwaZulu-Natal during the 2019-2020 financial year alone. Let's just look at that again. For 1 year, 2019 to 20, there were 18,550 teenage pregnancies. That's girls between 10 and 17, school-going age. That's frightening, right? Huh? What do we make of that?
I spoke a little bit about this on my show, Gareth. When the stats were like fresh dropped. At the time, I think they released like the numbers were at 22,000 girls, and I was literally scared because that means that this is a pandemic on its own, where young girls are literally falling pregnant left, right, and center. And the sad part is that when the media does bring it up and speak about it, it's always, what are these young girls doing? Where are these young girls going? At no point are they speaking about these men or the other parties that are involved in this. Because, I mean, these young girls aren't just waking up and deciding, you know what, let me just go find them. It's always either somebody in their home that's doing this to them, or someone in their family that's doing. They don't need to go far, by the way. They don't need to go far to get to encounter these situations. It's right underneath their noses, and nothing is being done about it because, it's just scary. It's shocking that this is now a norm. It's very much a norm. For us, we can sit on the show and be like, oh my God, really? Are these the numbers? In the rural areas, this is a norm. In some townships, this is a norm where the young girl on the side of the street from the corner house is pregnant. That's just what it is. And it's extremely, extremely sad.
Yeah, I don't know how we're going to solve this problem. And then, the MEC went on to talk about the issue with these sugar daddies, these guys in their 40s who are dating girls who are in their teens. And in some of these places, because these girls just have no money at all, these guys come along and they've got some money, they buy them airtime or whatever it is. I mean, we've joked about like how you can get sex for airtime in South Africa, but it's not actually funny. It's actually terrifying. If you think about these young girls, like who are having to sleep with these older men, or maybe in some cases they're doing it willingly, who knows? But it's disgusting that these men are taking advantage of these girls because anyone who's under the age of, in my opinion, like 19, 20, let alone 18, 17, when there's a guy around taking advantage of that, he's the predator. He's the one who must own up. And we know who these people are because they're not going to operate in a vacuum. They don't go and date this girl in another world. They date her in this world. So they've got to be together around other people at some point. And that means other people are going to see them at some point. And other people are not going to go, hang on a second, that's not right. That old man being with that young girl doesn't seem right.
And also, I mean, in high school, I did witness quite a bit of this. I did witness girls actually dating these older guys. And back then, from my perspective, it seemed exciting. It was like, wow, she got the latest phone. She got the latest this, the latest shoes or whatever the fashion was at the time. But then the older you get, the more you realize that this is wrong, man. This is an uneven relationship. This is basically rape as well. It's very disturbing.
No, it is disturbing. And Corona's Boring says here, in Hungary, they made a newspaper article congratulating the man and made him mayor. That was in a story that we had on Friday on the show. And it's just as bad in a place like Hungary. But here in South Africa, the fact that the MEC for Health has to address this because it's so widespread. And as you said, Mash, there are these girls at school, even your stories from your own school, where you look at it and you're like, wow, she's got a new phone. And then you realize, oh, that's how she got it right. That's not so great.
Absolutely. Yeah, that is not great. Especially once you grow up and you realize that, first of all, this phone that she got then today it's nothing. It was the latest back then. It just shows you also how these material things are not worth it. They are not worth it.
But some people are so desperate they'll do anything. I'm not excusing it. And Goldashik says they should all be arrested because they're actually technically pedophiles, and that's exactly right.
Absolutely,
it's spot on. And I'm not saying Color says here you're wrong. Sex with a minor can never be consensual. No, I'm not disputing that at all. All I'm saying is that sometimes there is a bit of say so, even from the young girl's parents. There's some of these people look at it and they give a wink and a nod rather than condemning it outright. So there's something about society that we have to look at here too. Because I understand what the law says, but there's something that is much more disturbing that's operating at a community level, where if the rich guy in the town, if the wealthiest guy in that village seems to think he can do this, no one is brave enough to stand up to him, which is much more scary.
Yeah, and you can imagine on like a smaller scale where it's just like family, right? It's even worse there. Like if like the family members find out or whatever, it's just kept under wraps. I just want to comment on what Tracy said. So Tracy, speaking of sugar daddies, watch Keep Sweet, Pray and Obey on Netflix. So it's a show, and I've seen it. It is horrid. Literally, just to prove that this thing isn't a new thing. It's been ongoing for like years. It's about the FLDS, Mormon-esque group, basically, where this leader had 65 wives. And the whole idea was that if you're a man, you can have as many wives as you want. And the wives got younger and younger and younger. I think towards the end, he got arrested for raping, I think, like a 12-year-old while some of his wives watched. But because this was religion, we're okay with it. It just sheds some light on what you're speaking of, this sickness, this disease that exists in society around ultimately not really protecting children, and just kind of just going with the wind, and it's horrid.
We've spoken about cults on the show before, and to me the difference between a bona fide religion and a cult, it's a very gray area. Because we will say, oh no, that's a religion if there are millions or billions of people over the world who believe in it. But if it's a couple of hundred, we go, oh, it's a cult. But in the end, a lot of these cults and religions are based around the leader getting sex from young women. Have you 100%. Noticed that? That's always like one of the main goals of these cults is the moment. Let me just tell you something. If you're at a church or a weekly meeting or at a temple or whatever they call it, and you get together with a bunch of people and someone says, no, you've got to sleep with me. The leader of that organization says, you've got to sleep with me to get to heaven or to win on earth or whatever else it might be. Then you're in a cult. Get the hell out of there and stand up for yourself. It's not worth it. because I can promise you it's going to end in tears. Always does.
Always does.
Tiger says the sad truth is that all these young women will never become independent and self-empowered. The cycle continues to perpetuate, and that's true too. That's very, very sad and very scary. Lindy Nduli says, my dad is a high school teacher, and a woman in her 40s came to beat a student up for dating her taxi driver husband. She came for the child and not her predator husband. That's scary.
See, that's another huge part of the problem that exists where, again, the men are just absolved of any responsibility.
Yeah.
Like, oh, you slept with a young woman? Okay, I'm going to go beat up the young woman. Instead of dealing with the fact that your man ain't shit. That is part of the problem of the cycle that just continues and continues. And we've just got a long way to go with these things.
And this is a problem we've had for years. I mean, do you guys remember the show Cheetahs years ago, where women would be shown that your man is cheating. He's cheating on you with this woman. This poor woman has no clue who you are. She doesn't even know that you exist. And then you go and beat her up. She's in the same shoes as you. She's in the same boat as you. So it's a very sad situation either way.
I wonder, we must maybe discuss this one day with Dr. Hanan, because he might have a grip on this better than us. It's amazing the capacity of a woman who's in love with a man to forgive that man when he cheats on her. And all the anger and all the focus and all the hatred is on the other woman, not on the husband. Meanwhile, he's the one who initiated it. He's the one who's in a relationship. He's the one who should be saying no, but she's the bad person, and he gets away with everything, like Lebang says. It's a very weird thing that happens.
And it happens all the time.
We got to move on. It is time. It's time for a little African analysis with JJ Cornish. It's brought to you by the Johannesburg Business School. We're looking at what is happening around the African continent, and we're going to talk to JJ this morning about a couple of the stories that are going around. Hey, JJ, how are you?
Bonjour. I'm exceedingly well, thanks.
Very good. Nice to see you. And we did celebrate Africa Day the other day, which I thought was worthy of some note. And maybe we're the only show, I'm not sure, that there are that many shows that are participating in African news at least every week or 2 weeks. But I'm glad that we are playing our part. And I know that Kenya's election is a big discussion that we can have in a little while. But maybe you want to talk about the Congo first and Patrice Lumumba, because his remains have finally been returned to his family. And when we say his remains, not a lot was left, because we know how he died. Do you want to take us through that story, JJ? Because it's quite an epic tale.
Patrice Lumumba, he was the man that we know what the DRC could have become. He was a symbol of that. Now, a year after being made a prime minister, elected prime minister, the first prime minister, he was there was a coup, and he was taken and murdered, in fact, shot by separatists and mercenaries. And, the CIA, they felt, the West felt that he'd become too pro-Soviet at the time. It was the Cold War. And writing about it at the moment, so many things happened in the Cold War. For example, the West protecting apartheid South Africa during the Cold War. Shocking, horrible things. They don't like to be reminded about it, but it's a fact. Now, Patrice Lumumba, they thought he was pro-Soviet, so they shot him. And, Mobutu Sese Seko was one of those involved in his murder. Now, they dissolved his body in acid, but they kept his teeth as some sort of macabre sort of memento of the man, and it's one gold cap tooth that they have of his. And we know that the king of Belgium, King Philippe, was in Congo last week, stopping short of a formal apology for what has happened, i.e. I'm terribly sorry, and here's money to make up for it. We do have then the Prime Minister Alexandre de Coco of Belgium also saying that they have moral responsibility for his killing, and here was a man who was killed for his words, his political convictions, and his ideals, all very wrong. So his son has been given the tooth, who's taking it back to the Congo. They've declared 3 days of mourning, and it will be buried so they can get some kind of closure. But, it was an absolutely shocking business. And Patrice Lumumba's words, it's well worth Googling that one, because, he really was a remarkable, remarkable figure. and a bogeyman, of course, to the West because he was such an independent thinker. But he was really a man today who would be considered, would be very mainstream in terms of African thinking. So it was an absolute disaster that he was killed. And really, the Congo has never recovered, from the stuff that happened back then, before its independence and afterwards.
Oh yeah. Well, I'm surprised that that King Philippe of Belgium wasn't more apologetic, because I think that his ancestor Leopold probably did more damage to the African continent than any other single person. And the kind of savagery that went on in the Congo, I mean, it's absolutely appalling when you hear the stories about people who had their hands cut off because they wouldn't work hard enough. And
picture of the man showing. Picture of a father showing his 5-year-old daughter with her hands having been chopped off because he didn't cut enough rubber for. Leopold was one of the great mass murderers of that history will have. He's an absolute monster.
And ran the place like his own private slave camp, the whole of the Congo. And there's a statue to him in in Belgium to this day, and people forgive that. They say it's okay. We're worried about statues to people who came from an era where that kind of prejudice may have been more run of the mill, more day to day. But here's Leopold of Belgium, who is, by all accounts, one of the most wicked people in history. And it seems that he gets a free pass by the people of Belgium. And fine, King Philippe's apologized, but kind of half-heartedly. I think that Belgium should be doing everything they can to set that right, because there's blood on their hands even to this day. Anyway, I do think we've got to move on, though. Human rights bodies, apparently no fewer than 24 of them, are urging the Commonwealth to hold Rwanda's feet to the fire at a summit in Kigali this week. Apparently, there are a whole lot of people in the Commonwealth who are very, very angry with Rwanda. But there's also this funny deal with Rwanda and Britain, where if you end up illegally immigrating to Britain, they will send you to Rwanda. What's going on here, JJ? It's very confusing.
Rwanda, of course, was not a member of the British Empire at all, and it became a member of the Commonwealth back in 2009. It's the latest country to become a member, and there were very real concerns about its human rights at the time, and they said you've got to look at it. That hasn't improved, and when we talk about human rights, we're talking about harassment, threats, and of course killing of opponents of Paul Kagame. Patrick Karegeya, his former intelligence chief, killed in 2013 in the Michelangelo Hotel. Kayamba Nyamwasa, his former military chief, they attempted to assassinate him outside his house in Johannesburg. So that sort of thing. It's cut ties between Rwanda and South Africa. They're furious about it. They expelled 3 diplomats. We expelled 3 diplomats. They expelled 6 of ours. The presidents have got together at an African Union, on the fringes of an African Union meeting, and they're trying to get together again, but it hasn't happened. And as we know, President Cyril Ramaphosa is not at the Commonwealth Summit in Kigali this week. I mean, he has other things to do. His spokesman saying this is not a snub, but the other 53 members are all there. The heads of state are all there. But essentially, Human Rights Watch, Amnesty International, and 22 others, including a Commonwealth human rights body, is saying if you don't hold his foot to the fire on this one, your credibility and your standards and your integrity will be at stake. And they give a list of things that have to happen. Stop taking in journalists who have been caught, who are critical of you. You need to reiterate the core values of human rights of the Commonwealth, and it certainly does have that. But are they going to speak against Paul Kagame? He doesn't seem to think. I mean, he's a very, very arrogant man. I told you when I went to interview him, he sat like P.W. Botha used to, on a stage. His desk was elevated above everybody else so that he looked down on you. And here he has got the Commonwealth. He thinks he's got the Commonwealth. I certainly hope that they're going to make a lot of noise about it publicly. As for his taking in the British, the unwanted migrants to Britain, because the ones they want, they'll take in. And in fact, they go and poach people, Britain does when it wants them. That has been stalled because of action, not by the British courts, but by the European Court of Human Rights. And Britain is still a member or still subservient to that. And now there's people in Britain saying we should get out of that. But of course, it's a very important body. So that's been stalled at the moment. But, you know, they did say if they're not on this plane, they'll be on the next. And there's a number of them. Eventually, they were going to fly a plane to Kigali with 3 people on it from the original 31 because of court actions. So it's a mess for Bojo.
Paul Kagame is such a controversial figure. I don't think it would be saying too much to say that maybe Rwanda is the most controversial country in Africa right now, because there are people who love him and say, well, he runs the country very well, and, you know, it's clean and tidy, and people abide by the law because they're terrified. And then there are people who criticize him quite rightly for his dictatorial tendencies and for the fact that the place is pretty much an autocratic state. What are your feelings about Rwanda? I mean, are there things that we can learn from them, or is it all just worth criticizing? I mean, what are the opinions of other African leaders, for example, when it comes to Rwanda?
Well, you know, that he doesn't have a huge following. And of course, Paul Kagame is seen as the man who ended the genocide back in 1994. Well, there were others that did that, and most of them have been killed. Paul Kagame came up through the middle of that. So I'm an inveterate critic of the man, and I see many Africans are too. And when I speak about this issue with Britain, the overwhelming sense is what an embarrassment for him, because at the end of the day, little Rwanda, the land of 1,000 hills, is one of the poorest countries in the world, remains that, despite his development plans. And, you know, I have to say, you're not allowed to mention tribe in Rwanda. You can't talk about whether you're a Tutsi or a Hutu. Well, let's say on this program, we're not allowed to mention race. But I'll just give you a hint about who really likes Paul Kagame. It's people of the same color as you and I, not the same color as Mash and Lebang. So does that give you some indication? You want somebody who keeps the streets neat, who prosecutes you if you drive a dirty motor car. Well, whose kind of standards are those? But doesn't matter if, you know, if he kills his opponents. My goodness.
Yeah. Yeah. It's like those people who say to you, well, the trains run on time in Nazi Germany. That was a good thing. Anyway, let's just look at one last thing. Kenyan farmers, and I mentioned the Kenyan elections, but they want to resume multi-million-dollar daily exports of a narcotic, which is called cat. We've all heard about cat, to Somalia and Somaliland, and they stopped that during COVID. But is this a normal trade? Is this a trade that can be done under the eyes and the noses of the government?
4% of Ethiopia is the biggest producer. 4% of their exports are cut. Mira, they call it. In Somaliland, I wanted to interview a minister, very high minister, and they said, well, you can do it on Thursday, Friday, because on Wednesday he chews. And, you know, they sit around and they chew the leaves. And then they use a lot of sugar because the leaves are very bitter, so they all get rotten teeth from it. It creates tens of thousands of jobs. You know, it costs $58 a kilogram, this cut. It's got a red stem. The women are into producing it. The men are into chewing it. And when you go and sit and chew it, it has this mildly narcotic effect. It suppresses the appetite. I wish I could get some at this time for that purpose. And then you know, I mean, people are saying, no, well, it's a perfect social thing. You have to chew it to understand it. But it does keep the men away from their families. They get disinvolved or uninvolved with their families and that sort of thing. So there's no doubt there are social evils involved in it. But I found, Somaliland, which is reliant on aid to a large extent, when you go into the town after lunchtime, when the people start chewing cut, it takes up, it accounts for much more than the aid pouring into the country. When I covered elections there, I observed elections. I'd walk into a polling station, and it was like going to a rock festival in the 60s. You'd say to the guy, how things going? And he'd go, oh, wow, man. Yeah, well, we ran out of ballot papers, Oh, wow. I said, well, have you phoned the central office? Now I'm an observer. I've got to make sure that everything's going to be all right. Have you phoned the central office? Have you ordered new papers? Oh, yeah, we're going to do that, man. Yeah, we're going to do that. So I said, but when did you run out of paper? Well, when did you run out of ballot papers? Oh, well, about 4 hours ago, man. And that's because, they started chewing cut at about 10 o'clock. It was quite amazing. And what it does, it makes people very mellow, but
I really thought this was cat, as in the stuff that's like cocaine, but it's cut with other stuff. This is cut, KHAT. So this is
also called Mira.
Mira.
It was legal in South Africa until maybe a decade ago. It's now illegal in.
Hasn't spread all over the rest of the world, and how come it never took off here?
Well, I that's my generation's got to answer that, because we got, I don't know, maybe better stuff. I don't know. Huh? Ask those people whose phones and Apples you've got to work. They'll tell you. I think there was better stuff, or people were too busy making out. The fact is, it's an appetite. As I say, it's this mild narcotic. It takes you out of things. It certainly was very popular wherever the Somalis or Kenyans went. So it was very popular all over Europe. It's been banned all over Europe now because of that. And I don't know, South Africa, because of, the Calvinist ethic that worked at the time. You couldn't see Andre Stredig chewing cut, could you?
No. I mean, parallel parking.
Maybe it would have made him a much cooler guy.
It's also used by pirates in Somalia to stop seasickness, among other things. So interesting stuff. JJ, I'm afraid that's all we've got time for this morning, but thank you again for a really interesting look at what's going on just north of our border, and there's always plenty of useful information in there too. All the way from Patrice Lumumba to cut. We've learned a lot this morning. It's great to have you on. We will see you in a couple of days' time.
Looking forward to it.
Cheers,
Very
JJ.
good. That's JJ Cornish.
Cheers, JJ.
And of course, that is brought to you by the Johannesburg Business School. We had to try and squeeze as much in there as possible. We've got a whole lot more coming your way, including an expert called Dr. Gérard Labuschagne. He's a clinical psychologist, a criminologist, and an advocate. He's got an interest in forensic and investigative psychology. I think this is going to be a really interesting discussion. We've got to talk about criminal profiling. We've got to talk about parole hearings and how those don't work, because in South Africa, a lot of people who are eligible for parole are people who really should still be in jail, according to the experts. So we'll find out what he thinks of that. And also what you can do about your own risk and threat assessment. How can you figure out which criminals can be rehabilitated and which ones you need to be careful of forever because they can't be fixed? So a whole lot of questions. We're dealing with the Crime and Investigation channel this week. That's us. We're talking to all these people.
Look at us.
Stories in that. That's right. Lebang and Mash and I will be here to look after you in the next hour. Don't go anywhere. CliffCentral.com. It's Tuesday morning, the shortest day of the year. Just because it's about technology, connecting your business to the rest of the world doesn't mean you need to send rockets to space and use complicated solutions. Want to simplicate things? Well, join Jaco Voigt, who is the CEO of Catalytic, on the Unbundled podcast. With skin in the game and a keen focus on educating and assisting you and your business, Jaco decodes all the aspects of connectivity, security, and cloud solutions. Unbundled is brought to you by Catalytic and is available on cliffcentral.com, Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, Spotify, or wherever you get your podcasts.
this week on the Auto Trader podcast.
Here's an interesting thing that I did find. Elon Musk said in a tweet, and I'm going to quote him verbatim, so there's no vast majority of vehicle motion return to the battery as the electric motors act like a generator in reverse. So that's the
regenerative braking.
Correct. But the most important thing that he said in the tweet was brake pads on a Tesla literally never need to be replaced for the lifetime of the car.
Yeah, there's a guy in Europe somewhere. So it's either a Tesla or an I-Pace. I'm not sure.
What, he just didn't use his brakes at all?
He didn't replace his brakes for 200,000 kilometers.
Wow.
Catch us every Monday at 9 a.m. on YouTube and on autotrader.co.za.
All right, we are live on a Tuesday morning, and we want to hear from you. You can drop us a comment in the comment section on the YouTubes, the Facebooks, and the Twitters. And if you want to email us, contact@cliffcentral.com. It is me with Mash and Lebang this morning. Mash, who's been interning with us at cliffcentral.com. He's been doing all kinds of work in the background. You may have seen him in some of our TikTok videos, in some of our YouTube stuff. So it's good to have you on, Mash. And how's it going for you for your first time this morning? Are you nervous or are you good?
I'm not nervous at all. I'm just wondering how on earth you guys wake up this early every single day.
Ask Simpiwe and ask Homolemo. They're up before any of us. They have to get things going before anyone else. Yeah, not great.
Because just
not easy.
Just the thing of, because waking up this early is just the thing of you have to plan your whole day, your previous day around waking up this early. So going to bed extra early, it's a bit different.
You know what the bonus is? You know what the plus is? Is that you get to do everything first, and you get to find out what's happening in the world before everyone else. And you get a bit of a head start on the rest of the people.
Absolutely.
While they're all still figuring out how to wake up and kind of rubbing their eyes and brushing their teeth. You've already been up for 2 hours. It's the way to do it, I'm telling you.
That is the way to do it. Absolutely.
All right.
I mean, you get here, then you...
A very pregnant Lebang is still with us with a baby that weighs 3.2 kilograms. So you've got to be really careful because you could topple over at any time, right? 3.2 kilograms extra is going to make you lean a little bit.
That's literally my walk now. It's called the penguin walk. I waddle when I need to get anywhere, but I'm still able to pretty much do everything. Like I'm still driving. I'm still nothing has changed except for the fact that there's a 3.2 kilogram human inside of me that's just kicking at any moment. I'm literally, and I was telling Mash earlier that I'm in Operation Get Baby Out. So I Googled things to do if you want to, naturally induce yourself. I am eating all the pineapples in the world. I'm drinking all these funny teas. I'm having way too much sex. It's just all trying to get this child out of me. But she clearly has no interest. She's just like, no, lady, you are not going to tell me what to do. So on paper, I still have 2 weeks to go, but I'm just please help me to help you, to help us.
Lebang. Lebang, I lift 3 kgs at the gym. That baby's heavy.
Yeah.
How do you sleep? What position are you sleeping in?
I can only sleep on my right side with a pillow in between my legs. That's it. That is the only. I can't sleep on my back. And sleeping on my left is just a little bit uncomfortable because I get heartburn all the time. It is a bit chaotic, but that's the least of my worries. It's everything else. It's just I'll be walking. I was in Sandton yesterday, so I was walking, cha-la-la-la-la, and then I just felt this go, in my stomach, and I just kind of paused. I just looked around and I'm like, okay, cool. Just keep it cool. Don't jump, Issa. This might be a contraction. Took a deep breath and then just started walking again slowly. So that's that's the real entertaining part is this can happen at any moment. Every 12 hours there's a real something going on in there.
Well, Tracy says if you get a strong foot massage and focus on the area around the ankles, ovarian bands are located there. If there's nothing stopping the baby from coming out, it works like a charm. Sure. Okay. Wow. Foot massage. I mean, who would say no to a foot massage anyway, right?
Not this girl.
And Lebang, is it possible to actually go to the hospital and have it delivered early?
Only if it's an emergency, a medical emergency. If I start bleeding heavily, If my water breaks unexpectedly, then sure, I'll have to go. But you can't just knock on the door and be like, hey guys, I need my child to come out early. Can you make this happen?
I've got
Unless
a lunch at 5.
yeah, I'm meeting up with Oprah at 6:30. So can you get this done? Chop, chop, chop. No, doesn't work like that. But with getting a Caesar is the only thing you're in control of. When you've got like a scheduled Caesar, you choose a date. They tell you the exact time, and then you at least know. With this, it's like I'm literally just living not knowing what's going to happen. This child at any time can decide, and that screws me over because, I've got plans. I've got shit to do. I want to go on with my life, but I can't. I have to kind of just wait.
Yeah.
So there's pros and cons, but more pros definitely than cons.
All right, so there's apparently an etiquette around this, and maybe we can help each other figure it out, and maybe we can help some other people too at the same time. If you have a friend who is maybe overdoing alcohol, maybe they're on drugs, maybe they've got a gambling addiction, some other kind of addiction, and you need to get them help, what is the way to introduce that into the conversation? The reason I'm asking this is because Lebang needs to know how it's okay and when it's okay, and is it rude to give someone contact details for a rehab facility? If you're worried about it, how do you don't just scribble it down on a piece of paper and kind of give it to them in their hand and say, that's for you. I thought you needed to know this. Like, how do you do this in a way that isn't?
By the way,
yeah, like how do you even broach the subject? So, this is a good question, and it may actually help a bunch of other people. I don't know. I've never advised anyone to go to rehab. Maybe there's some people I should have. But I'm not sure what the correct protocol is here. Does anybody know?
So the interesting thing, Gareth, is that I literally just saw like a little commercial on like the bathroom stall, like this and that rehab, we do this and that. But what caught my attention wasn't the alcohol, the drug abuse. It was literally like are you depressed? Are you suffering from anxiety? Are you isolating yourself from people? That's why I was like, crap, I actually know somebody that is suffering from this very thing and has been in denial all their lives. Should I take a quick screenshot? Should I quickly take a picture and just send it to him casually? Should I just kind of make a thing out of it? Do we do an intervention? How do I actually just confront this thing and say, hey, this could be of value because I know you're unhappy and I want you to live a happier life. Try this out. It had nothing to do with like, the alcohol abuse and all that stuff was like, classic rehab 101 stuff. But what stood out to me was that this place is claiming that they can assist you with, other things like reconnecting with people, learning how to love again, blah, blah, blah. And I was like, damn, this is it. I'm in the bathroom stall and this is the ad I'm seeing. It's about where you are. It's about timing. It's all about
Gary says a rehab ad in a bathroom stall sounds like just the place. Don't know about that. Yeah. Sean says, be straightforward. Say, yo, bro, you have a problem and I want to help. Some people don't respond very well to that, hey? It really doesn't. It doesn't make a lot of people happy to know that you are onto them and that you think they have a problem and that they need some help. It can be very insulting for people. So you've got to approach it very carefully.
You have to be, and also approach it in a positive manner. As you said, it'll help them actually find love again and actually find the positive and the good back in their life, get some good back in their life. So actually approach it in that positive manner, as opposed to the, you need help.
I'm scared, guys. I'm way too scared. I'm more worse. I feel like I'm going to be rejected. This person's actually just going to tell me to fuck off properly.
Just give it a shot either way.
I don't know.
Sure.
Because I also had a friend who actually I saw signs of depression because he was buying so much cake every day. Like he'd buy half a cake every single day, and actually every single day just eating half a cake.
Yeah.
And and I knew that this is not normal behavior. Nobody just eats half a cake every single day, and also a slab of chocolate on the side.
Unless it's Chateau Gâteau, then sure, makes sense.
But hang on a second. Like this person must have got very, very fat in a very short space of time.
He did. He got very fat in a very short space of time. And it got to a point where, he didn't have a car at the time. So I was actually taking him to the shops every single day. So it was kind of my fault a bit.
Enabler.
So you would help this person. So this is a friend of yours. You would load him up into the car and then you would take him to a cake shop. He would buy a cake and a slab of chocolate. And then you would take him back home again.
Yes, I would. And I would also take him to a chicken restaurant, fast food joint, and go through the drive-through and get him wings as well. And then I'll take him home.
You are what we call you are an enabler. That's what you call that, right, Lebang?
That's true. Yeah.
Yeah,
So it
100%.
So it was a bit difficult to confront him because I was the one actually taking him to these places to begin with.
Damn right.
Yeah, no.
So Ntokozo's advice here is just leave them alone. It's always up to them. Once they feel it's time, they will seek help. Well, that's that may be the hard truth, right?
I think it might have to be. Look, if it means watching a person literally deteriorate year after year, that may just be the my standpoint of I can't do much for you if you're not doing anything for yourself, type thing. And I worry that the day won't come where they realize that they need to seek help, and they're just fine living in this wallow and just kind of surviving versus actually living. But again, what can I actually do for somebody who's not willing to help themselves? Maybe I should just take this energy and focus on myself and just keep it moving. There's literally not much I can do. So, yeah, correct. You are right.
Yeah.
I'm just going to leave it.
Yeah. Unfortunately,
Yeah, go ahead.
Unfortunately, we live in an information-driven world. So if they don't want to seek the help themselves, because all the resources are available online, if they don't actually want to diagnose themselves and seek that help themselves, they don't want it. They just don't want it.
Yeah.
Inga's being funny. She says, "Tell us the truth, Gareth. Is that really what happened to Mbulelo?" Cake eating.
Not a chance.
He's still fit as can be. But it's funny. A friend of mine, she said to me the other day, she was like, I think I'm going to have to cut down on my drinking. So I said to her, what do you mean? She said, no, I really think it's a problem. She said she realized that it was a problem because she was drinking on her own in the middle of the week. And that was before lunchtime even. And I think that's usually a sign. That's when you know you've got problems.
And that's not even the first sign. That's not even like sign number one. That's like
you're already at step 8 there.
That's step 8. Yeah, the red flag is now maroon, honey. It's you're knee deep in this.
The next step is now you're putting vodka in water bottles and going to work with that. That's the next step.
There are people who do that.
Yes, I actually watched an episode of Dr. Phil where he was a family came to, they actually brought I think it was a sister, one of their sisters to the show because she's an alcoholic. And then Dr. Phil is like, you came here with your own bottle. Let us smell that. And then they opened it on stage and it was vodka in there. That's when I realized that there are levels to this. Levels. Unfortunately.
Wow. That sounds wild. Filling a water bottle up with vodka and taking it to work. I think at that point you're finished. Now, another thing that we've got to have an answer for this morning. I love when we solve people's social problems and we help people figure out, like Lebang, whether or not you've pretty much got the answer now from Ntokozo, who says just leave the person alone and don't interfere if it's none of your business on that front. But Mash has got his own problem here because he's got a friend, a roommate actually in this case, who cannot cook but keeps trying. And you can only take so many bad meals before you have to say something. And a lot of people I find watch these TV chefs, right? They watch these cooking programs on TV, and then they think if they just if they have the same mannerisms as these TV chefs, or if they do the stuff that the TV chef does while the camera's rolling instead of the stuff that they never show you while the camera's off, or the disasters and the mistakes that happen because they're trying to make a TV show. They don't really care about whether or not you can cook this thing at home. These people who watch those shows and then they think they are chefs and they think they've got this extraordinary ability just because they have the ingredients and they've got a kitchen and they've got hands. And they can't actually. I mean, like I admit, Mash and Lebang, I admit right up front, I'm a useless cook. I can do a few things, but when it comes to like baking or, doing complicated dishes that you have to do over an hour or two, and there's adding this and taking that out, waiting for this to set and making that happen, I just don't have that skill at all. It's just not something I can do. This friend of yours obviously doesn't have the ability to realize that they're no good at this.
Yeah, I mean, there's been signs. You know, when we first moved in, there was small little signs, but I didn't actually take them to head. What finally actually just tipped me over was the other day she calls me and she's like, can you please send me a voice note of how you make pancakes? And I'm like, hi, Bo. Hi, I don't have time for this. I just sent her a link from YouTube. So now, and now she actually starts cooking these pancakes from YouTube. And now it's a thing of she wants pancakes just for herself. So obviously you're not going to use many eggs. You're not going to use much ingredients because you're making for one person. The video I sent her, I didn't even watch it. It was making pancakes for like 10 people. So she followed these instructions letter for letter, word for word. And she ended up with a huge bowl of batter. And then she tried to put all of this into the pan. And then when I got home, it was just a big fat mess. It was just globules. It looked like she was trying to make scones. I don't know what she was trying to do. Maybe she was trying to actually make a cake in the pan. I'm not too sure. But either way, I was just like, listen, this is not it, but great. I appreciate your effort. And but I actually want to tell her, like, okay, don't do this again. But I don't know how to say that in a polite way.
But Mash, what would you rather have? A roommate that doesn't cook at all and literally waits for you to cook everything, or somebody who's at least trying themselves out and failing at pancakes? Like, you'd rather eat a sloppy pancake than eat nothing at all when you get home, because some roommates are just trash, dude.
But also, my thing is also I get home late. I'm always running the streets. So she can't wait for me either because she's going to starve to death if she waits for me.
Let me help you, my friend. 2 words: air fryer. That's it. Just get an air fryer for the apartment.
Here we go. Here we go. Lebang is all right, Mash, you don't know what this is, but I know a lot of people who are listening to us this morning are tired of Lebang and this goddamned air fryer. She cannot stop talking about it. She is obsessed with this thing. She has made it such an issue that now I cannot help myself. Now, because of you, Lebang, everywhere I go, and even on my phone, all I'm getting is air fryer ads. I think it's because you keep mentioning it every week.
It's the gods.
What are the benefits?
The algorithm gods out there are looking out for you. You just said it yourself that you're not a strong cook and that you can do bare minimum. This will elevate you from bare minimum to you can have conversations about food. Now you can participate when people bring up potatoes, because now you can say chips, you can say wedges, you can say whatever. Just listen, guys, air fryer, this is your answer to all your problems. Mash, thank me now.
But what's the difference? What's the difference between an air fryer and an oven? Because I think they do the same thing.
No, honey. Number one, you don't need to use a lot of oil. Number one, with an air fryer. Okay.
Ooh, oil is expensive, yeah?
Sure, oil is expensive.
She's going to talk about this for another hour. Thanks, Mash. Look what you've done.
And I can. And I'll send my invoice later. Listen, just change your life. You can do everything in an air fryer. You can bake. You can do bacon. You can do scones. You can freaking dog. There's nothing that you can't do in an air fryer. Just Google it.
Right,
aren't you on TikTok?
I am on TikTok.
So
yeah, put it in the search bar, air fryer.
Okay.
Here's how you win me over on the air fryer thing. And I thought about this after our 25th discussion on air fryers, because you're obsessed with these things. It's cleaner, right? Your kitchen is not a mess because you could seal this thing up and it does all its stuff, and you don't have like oil and fat all over the stove and all the usual shit. Is that true or is that bullshit?
It's absolutely true. It's what you're saying. Everything is literally compartmentalized in this one little machine that kind of looks like a spaceship. And then you just open up that drawer and your food is cooked to what I can really call perfection. You know, it tells you, okay, cool. Hey, come check on me. It'll go, you come and you check. Look, if you want to save time, guys, if you want to save, like, I even have less dishes because I'm not busy with pots and pans and scraping and scrubbing. Everything inside that one air fryer. Clean.
Now you're talking. Okay, I like this. So Tiger, Corona's boring, Moonchild, Empty Apology, Saki, Elon is God, Ndogozo, they're all saying, oh, love air fryers, love air fryers. Yes, it's true. And it uses less electricity, says Anna Marie.
There we go.
Lots of people.
Need I say more?
I'm buying one this afternoon. I'm buying one this afternoon.
There we go.
So okay, and these things, I even know how much they cost now because I got a WhatsApp about it, or not a WhatsApp. It came up on Instagram or something. I'm telling you, it's because you keep talking about it. My phone's sitting here listening to the show every day. It's
you don't know
Lebang.
it yet, but you already own it, Gareth. You don't know it yet, but you already own an air fryer. I'm just stating the fact.
You know,
in the next few weeks,
the day will come. The day will come when we all have a big air fryer reveal on the show, and I'll have to show you my air fryer that I bought because Lebang has strong-armed me into it, and I had no option. All right. Well, that's all we got time for on that front. I hope that we've solved at least these two problems this morning. So, Lebang, your problem with the rehab question, I think we could tick that one off.
yes,
Nash,
sir.
your problem with your roommate. I do agree with Lebang. At least this roommate of yours is trying to cook things, because you do get those people who just sit on their backsides and you have to do everything. And those people, I think, are always a lot worse, don't you? I mean, like, you'd rather have someone who's making an effort.
Yeah, making an effort.
So even if,
yeah. I mean, I will actually teach her.
And this person clearly has no skill in the kitchen, but you'd rather have that than someone who just doesn't care at all. So let's see what we can do here. A little bit of compassion. Dear Linda says, just to finish off the air fryer discussion, because this is never going to go away thanks to Lebang. In fact, we're all excited that when she eventually does give birth, it'll be the first time on the show we don't have to talk about air fryers. Dear Linda says, it is an ugly machine. I do not like it in my kitchen. Now, is that true? Is it ugly?
I mean, it's not about how you look on the outside. It's about the inside.
I've seen them. They don't fit into any kitchen.
They're huge. Like, it depends on the size that you get. Some of them are like massive. Some of them are like less massive. But they generally aren't supposed to be sexy machines. Like, they're there to do a thing. And the thing is prepare food, finish. It's not here to be like a freaking...
Anything you can't cook in these things?
I mean, I remember last time we spoke about it, the whole pap thing came about, whether you can make pap in the air fryer or not. And I haven't tried. But really, it seems like you can do a whole lot of crap in there, bro. Like, a lot.
You see what you've done here, Mash? Do you see what you've done? She goes on a tangent. She gets excited. She starts getting all animated. Never seen.
She doesn't have a bun in the oven. She has a bun in the air fryer.
Oh my god!
Beautiful. All right. Let me introduce our guest for this morning. He is a clinical psychologist, a criminologist, an advocate of the High Court, and interest in forensic and investigative psychology. And he's also got an interest in workplace threats, which I think we'll get into as well. He's worked at Westkoppies Psychiatric Hospital, famously, and in the South African Police Service as the section head of the investigative psychology section. These are amazing, amazing CV entries, but the man himself is also the head profiler, was for a long time, head profiler for the police, also successor to the legendary Mickey Pistorius, who you remember wrote a couple of books about forensic psychology, an expert on serial murder and rape cases. Gérard Labuschagne saw it all in his 14 and a half years in the SAPS. I'm very, very pleased to welcome him to the show this morning. Gérard, how are you?
Hi, morning, Gareth. Great, and yourself?
Good to see you, and thank you very much for making time for us this morning. It's really, what you do is just some people's favorite subject. Whole channels on DSTV that are dedicated to this stuff. And I'm sure Lebang and Mash are feeling the same way. There's so many questions I want to ask you. But did I get that mostly right? I mean, that's an incredible CV. That's an incredible list of skills and experience that you've had in your career. You must be quite in demand.
Well, it was an interesting career, and I had great opportunities during the police. They really treated me very well, and I had fantastic opportunities to, for example, train with people overseas or people that we brought out from overseas here. Whether my skills are in demand, the reality is the police are the ones that deal with all the kind of crimes I used to work with. And, they still have the old unit there that I was part of. So they kind of turn to those people, and there's still people with great skills there. So there's not really actually demand for a profiler in the private world, so to speak. Which is why I spend most of my time kind of working on the workplace violence issues since I left. And that was a conscious decision that's what I'm going to be focusing on once I leave.
But surely there are lots of private individuals and even companies that are interested in hiring someone with your skill set because you're able to figure out for them when something goes horribly wrong, whether it is something as drastic as murder and rape, or if it's something where someone is behaving very strangely. As a forensic psychologist, you can pick up on clues. You can deduce from behavior that there's something not right going on. Surely they ask your advice, even if it's in private institutions, about things that perhaps the state has ultimate control over, but where you can help them to figure out what's really happening in someone's mind, especially if they're a criminal sort of person.
So I do get contact every now and then by usually attorneys who has a client that's facing some, usually a violent crime, where I might be asked, for example, to testify at the sentencing of this individual to sort of explain what sort of risk do they pose to society and how should the court deal with them from a sentencing point of view. I still get contacted by the NPA when they're doing prosecutions from time to time to testify in certain cases. It's kind of a mixed bag. As I said, I did want to focus more on the workplace stuff when I left in 2016 and build that up. But I still do obviously love the good old-fashioned violent crime stuff. I find it very fascinating. So that's kind of where I do still dabble in it, is really more from a court case perspective to get involved in stuff.
Well, there's no shortage of stories in South Africa from that point of view, right? You've written a book. It's in the background there, the Profiler Diaries. But tell us a little bit about some of the... Yeah, no, we like that. Be obvious about it. And it's good to see your book because people are going to want to know more after you've spoken to us a little bit today. But maybe you can share some stories from your profiling days of some of the interesting cases that you were involved in to just remind people and jog our memories a bit.
Sure. There were so many. It's kind of weird when you're in the job, you don't really realize what you're in. It's really only when you left and you reflect upon it and you kind of go into a relatively normal life after leaving the police that you kind of realize, wow, you actually were involved in a lot of really interesting things. So it ranged anything from, I was involved in over 110 different murder series investigations in South Africa, and one or two outside of our borders, for example, in Namibia and Swaziland, and then, consulted ad hoc on some other ones over other parts of the world. And that's, a phenomenal number. If I used to speak to my profiling colleagues from other parts of the world, if they worked on one or two murder series in their careers, that was a lot. Unless you were sitting at the FBI, they probably worked on also quite a lot of cases at their behavioral analysis units. But it ranged from those to even more serial rape investigations. Oscar Pistorius case, I was at the crime scene and then sort of spent most of the time in the courtroom sitting behind Gerry Nel. So it's those types of cases, and a lot of them that just really didn't make it into the media at all. And I'd sit in these courtrooms when we were prosecuting this person. I'm thinking, that's interesting. There's actually no interest in this case. So that's kind of what some of the cases in the book are about. Some of them people would know, maybe more if you're an aficionado into sort of violent crime in South Africa. Well, and other ones, it's cases that would never have even been on people's radars, really. And in the second book, which is actually out in August of this year, same kind of thing. It's very ingeniously called Profiler Diaries 2. And there, it's also amazing cases that a lot of people who one or two of my colleagues who proofread it said, wow, I didn't even know this existed. I have never heard of this case. So it's a nice mixture of stuff that if you've heard about it, you're going to get really a lot of deep insight into the case. And then, stories that you might have never heard about that I think are equally as fascinating. And it was, like I said, it's just from a lot of it, I think about 98% of our cases, it was crimes against women and children. So that was quite, rewarding to be playing a role. And it ranged literally, as the subtitle of the second book, from crime scene to courtroom, because, we would be called out to crime scenes of an unusual case and would give input right then and there. We might stay involved in the investigation throughout, and then we might testify at the trial, or sometimes we're just called in to come give evidence right at the end at the trial phase. So it was really a spectrum of stuff from crime scene to courtroom. We used to go on arrests. We used to interview suspects. We would fly in helicopters. It was kind of really like to a degree, almost like what you imagine the profiler's life would be. But in reality, 99.9% of profilers are just sitting in the office, going through case files. So it was kind of a really amazing time. And I do miss it. But unfortunately, it changed with time. And it wasn't the rewarding job that I kind of had experienced it was for the first, 10, 12 years.
It's an amazing thing. People are really drawn to these stories. And I wonder if you've figured out what it is that is so compelling for all of us when we watch these crime series, when we get ensconced in a case. You mentioned the Oscar Pistorius case, famously in this country. It had everybody transfixed for 2 years?
Yeah.
Everyone had an opinion. Suddenly everyone was a forensic psychologist. Everyone was a lawyer. Started using terms that none of us had ever used before because we suddenly thought we were, involved in this case. And what is it about us that we are drawn to this macabre, grisly, dark side of humanity? Serial killers, murderers, rapists, the mind of a killer. There's so many spin-off series, there's so many books that have been written. You actually had real life experience at the coalface with a lot of this. You met some of these murderers, you saw the crime scenes. Why do you think ordinary old us are so obsessed with this stuff?
Look, I mean, I'm totally guilty of that. I mean, my whole life and career has pretty much been about macabre and gruesome stuff. And I mean, I just, as a psychologist, just found it a fascinating extension of human behavior. Yes, you get mental illness, you get people facing daily challenges, and those are always interesting. But this is just such an extreme form of human behavior, and it's real. So I think for me, like many, it's just so different to who we are as people that I think it's interesting to dabble in it in a very safe way, which is by reading about it and following it, the TV shows, etc., in a safe way, because we don't have to actually, get involved in that kind of stuff directly. And I think also the fact that it's local. If you're looking at the local crime stuff, it's stuff that has happened. These places. It's not some far-flung country in America and some sort of small, tiny state in the South. It's real. You've seen these places on the nightly news when they talk about the weather, or you've been there, or you know someone there. So it's close by. But I also do think a lot of it's because the cases in the end are solved. And I think in a way that gives us some kind of sense of comfort that, wow, these people can be stopped, that we do have the resources, they can be prosecuted and put away, and we know that they're in jail until Correctional Services Parole Board screws up and lets them out. So I think that's, something that makes people feel safe to dabble in the really dark elements.
Jared, speaking of local cases, there's one that's obviously extremely popular right now, the Senzo Mayua murder case, which is featuring, Kelly Kumalo. And what's your professional outlook on that case? I mean, don't tell me who you think did it, but like generally based on your experiences, what's your opinion on how that whole thing has just unraveled thus far?
I mean, that case has the makings of so many of a movie, or I think there's already a documentary on, Netflix or something, because of just the role players. Right. I mean, in essence, it's a murder, but it's who was around, who's on the peripheries. It's like the Oscar Pistorius case, in there, like you say. Look, I did play a little role, very tiny role, when I was still in the police, and after I left, I still spoke to some of the investigators. So I obviously don't want to get too in detail, but I think that a lot of the problems that we're seeing with this particular case, the issues about the crime scene, how it was handled, the police has created that problem for themselves. It started when Jackie Salebi, 2006, shut down all our specialized units, all our task teams, and decimated our violent crime capacity for investigation. They tried to recover, and unfortunately, a lot of the people who were those detectives left. They went to private industry, they went to banks and got 5 times their salary, better circumstances, better, perks, etc. And we haven't really recovered from that. And I've always found it amazing that why don't we have homicide units? We'll have at each police station, we'll have 1 or 2 people whose job it is to work with any unnatural death, which could be a road accident, a suicide, someone falling off the roof, yes, a murder, anybody who died that you weren't expecting to pass away. And you'll have that little lone detective dealing with 30, 40 dockets on their table. I mean, that's a recipe for disaster. And if we still had the old serious and violent crime units and their predecessors, which were the murder and robbery units, and of course they had a history of their own, but that kind of a unit where we say we're going to have a specialist team that covers maybe 10 police stations, consisting of 20 detectives, 5 on a standby group. Whenever that's the case, those 5 people go out and manage it. Then we wouldn't really have these problems that we're seeing in a lot of these investigations, where it's issues about how this crime scene was managed, what happened where. So we've created that problem, and that's exactly what happened with the Oscar Pistorius case. That would have gone to the, I think, the Bronco Spruit trio task team, which had, I knew them personally, phenomenal investigators. We wouldn't have had the hiccups we saw initially with the Oscar managing the crime scene, etc. So that doesn't mean the case is going to get solved, but at least we don't see these embarrassing things playing out in the courtrooms that we are seeing in this and many other cases. And at least here you're having decent prosecutor, defense counsel who are able to pick these things up. What about cases we don't necessarily have the best prosecutor or best defense counsel, and this potentially bad evidence gets in and you have a wrong guy convicted or the right guy let off. And that's a very big consequences for society, unfortunately.
Yeah, the system often lets people down. I know one of the areas of particular interest to you and something which we don't give any attention to, because once we send someone to jail, we think, well, that's them dealt with, is parole. I mean, this is a big story, and it's a massive problem in South Africa. Apparently, there's some very famous murderers who are up for parole or who have already been released from jail. We think they're going to be put away forever. How does that work, Gerard? Maybe you can give us some examples of where, you know, there's some awful people who are not rehabilitated at all, who are going to continue to present themselves as a danger to society, and they're being released back onto the streets.
Yeah, I mean, it's quite a phenomenal, and we, like you say, we always think, oh, if you know a life sentence, you're gonna be there till you die, and there's a lot of misunderstandings about the whole life sentence concept. So in South Africa, when you get a life sentence, it is until the day you die, but the question is where you're going to be serving it. You know, and after, typically in the standard scenario, after 25 years, you will become eligible. Doesn't mean you're going to get it, but you'll become eligible for parole hearings, and then probably every 2 years you'll have a subsequent hearing. So from 25 years onwards, if you've got a life sentence, you have that potential to have parole at some point, and you probably will get it, to be very honest with you, at some point after those 25 years. There were a few exceptions where there were constitutional court rulings which brought forward the parole dates for some people sentenced during a particular time frame. And that was around 2006, 2007. If you were given a life sentence, you might be affected by that. So like Donovan Woodley, who killed Lee Matthews, should have actually had a parole hearing only for the first time in 2029. And then he became suddenly eligible because of these two judgments. He became eligible, I think, 2019 or 2020. And the Matthews family did ask me to advise and consult with that particular case. And I can almost guarantee he's probably going to get it the next time around. I looked at that parole board and was just flabbergasted about how incompetent, to be honest with you, their decision-making was. It's
so Donovan Woodley, I mean, this is a famous story. We all remember what happened to Lee Matthews. There was that Formula One hotel. There was the dumping of the body out near Walkerville. Yeah. I mean, we're not going to forget this story in a hurry because it happened in places in Joburg we all know. Yeah. And it was such a horrifying story because, you know, these parents didn't even know where their daughter was. And then it turned out that there was this complete lunatic, this psychopath who had done all of this. His family seemingly didn't know he was crazy either. And now he's up for parole. Is there any chance in hell that Donovan Woodley's got better while he's been in prison?
I haven't seen evidence of it. Let me put it very tactfully that way. He spent basically pretty much since he was sent to jail, convicted and sent to jail, he spent pretty much every single year trying to get appeals, get special hearings, get things overturned, denying it was him. His version changed about 2 or 3 times during this time frame. Did an LLB, and he says in his court papers, I did my LLB for the purpose of helping me deal with my own appeals. And I think he didn't, when all of a sudden, when these constitutional court judgments suddenly came up, he realized, oh my goodness, I'm not heading for a 2029 parole date. Oh my goodness, I'm going to have parole now. I can't continue to say it's not me, because when you go to parole, you can't say I didn't do it. They don't want to hear that. So suddenly he's like, oh no, it was me. I'm very sorry, and I accept responsibility for all my claims over the past 8, 9, 10 years that it wasn't me. And now suddenly he's trying to sit there in the hearing as if I'm this honest, pious person, I accept responsibility. No, you've been lying for the past 10 years, putting this family through horrible trauma every time this issue comes up. And now that you suddenly realize, oh my goodness, I can't go to parole saying it's not me, like I've been saying in all my court papers for the past few years. It's like you sat there, but the scariest thing for me is the parole boards. On the board, you don't have people like psychologists, social workers. You have sort of 1 or 2 representatives of the community. I think it's 1 or 2 DCS members, a policeman. And thankfully, in this case, the policeman actually picked up that they were trying to sneak this parole hearing through and then said, well, we can't do this. We need more information. And the Matthews family had been dealing with correctional services literally on a weekly basis, saying, we want to participate. And they try to sneak it through. And then the policeman said, this is the Woodley case. Hang on a minute. Well, no. We have to stop this. And he contacted the prosecutor. And the prosecutor, who's been in contact with the Matthews family all these years, said, hey, do you know that actually they were trying to put a parole hearing through? And the Matthews family, but we've been speaking to these people all the time, literally all the time. So it's really horrific. So the parole board,
correctional services. Do we as the public have any? Do we have any access to this stuff? I mean, can you, as a member of the public, go and watch a parole board hearing? Do you know when these happen? We famously hear about when, like Janusz Walusz has his parole board hearings because it's newsworthy. Funnily enough, the Donovan Woodley situation hasn't made it to the news. Who else is up for parole at the moment that we should be careful of?
Well, that's the huge problem. There's on a daily basis, there's people coming up for parole. It's very worrying. And although they're not public in the sense of, I guess, a court case where anybody can just waltz in. I think they should be. But the problem is, there's family members are supposed to have the opportunity to participate in these things. And like we saw, the Matthews family they try to sneak it through, even though they've been in direct contact with them all the time. So I think that what about, someone who lives in an informal settlement whose son was murdered? How are they ever going to be knowing about these cases? I think there should be a public list on the website saying on this date, this person. I think the public should be able to register on an easy access system on the internet to register update their phone number and email address or whatever contact form they prefer on a website linked to a suspect's prison number, saying that, I want to be notified. That the correctional services can't turn around and say, oh, we didn't know how to get hold of this lady. We didn't have the details. We didn't have the information. That at least makes it easier that can't be the excuse. And that they should be public, that anybody who has an interest should be able to sit in that and hear the deliberations. Because I was literally flabbergasted at they wouldn't even allow my report that the Matthews family had asked me to compile to be even mentioned in that parole board. They said, no, only the Matthews family can ask him questions. No other alternative evidence can be presented or arguments can be presented at the parole board hearing. It's just written in a way. And if you don't think there's corruption at those parole boards, you're an absolute moron. If we happily accept that there's corruption in the police in the investigations, possibly not everyone, but that it's a possibility. We accept that there's a possibility of corruption amongst prosecutors. We're even starting to pretty much accept that there's potential for corruption amongst advocates, magistrates, and judges. Are you telling me there's no corruption when someone can release you halfway through your sentence, that there's no potential for corruption there? And when they don't have mechanisms in place, lifestyle audits, reporting systems, etc., then you've just allowed corruption to flourish at a parole hearing. And if I look at it, I'm just thinking either these people are incompetent or they're corrupted, because the decisions and how they make them are just bizarre. I mean, we had Monet Harmsa, that guy who committed that sword attack at the school in 2008 in Krugersdorp.
Yes, I remember him.
I actually did a parole assessment, an independent one in 2019, on a request from DCS. And the internal correctional service psychologist says there's no way you should be releasing this guy. He's a worse danger now than before he committed the crime because of certain things that have occurred over the past few years in prison. And then they released him. There you go, into your family's custody. And he's out.
You're saying he's out there at the moment. He's out in South Africa, this guy who used the sword to murder people.
Yeah. 4th of March, he was released, despite correctional services psychologists still submitting reports saying there's no way you must release this. And they kind of have, psychologists' reports are they're just one of the things we look at. It's like, okay, and you just ignore, seemingly. It's just bizarre. If you follow my Twitter feed, I always post these horrible parole incidents where somebody commits another crime.
What's your Twitter handle? Let's put that up so people can follow you.
I think it's at G Labuschagne. Where's my phone?
Well, while you're looking for it, let me just tell everybody on Cliff Central today, Gerard features in this week's episode of Beyond Madness, which delves into the psychology of serial killers, why we're so fascinated with them. Don't miss that, in proud association with Adcock Ingram OTC, the sponsors of Brave, and of course Professor Christopher Paul Szabo, who introduced us to you, Gerard. I'm very pleased to say. What's the Twitter handle?
Yeah, I found it. It's at GN Labuschagne, all one word. At G for Gerard, N for November, and then LABUSCHAGNE. Yeah, I don't post a lot, but I think when I do post, it's hopefully sensible, full of meaningful stuff.
This is such scary stuff. Like literally just sitting here listening to all of this. I wonder about actual rehabilitation, Gerard. Is there a way where, these people who have committed these crimes and who have participated in these extreme violent acts, can they truly be rehabilitated to such an extent where we can say, okay, you can be let back into society. You are 100% fixed. Go on with yourself. You know what? Is that possible, or is it just over for them? Like it's done?
You know, when you're looking at these kind of people, your serial murderers, your Donovan Woodleys, and the people who've done like the outlandish, really kind of violent stuff, I think we have to be very skeptical about the possibilities of rehabilitation. You have to assess each individual. Firstly, you cannot have a blanket statement. But, you know, for people like serial murderers, we don't know why someone becomes a serial murderer or a serial rapist or a pedophile, to be honest with you. So we have to be very careful about saying, and this is what seems to be the view in correctional services, if you've been a good boy in prison, you're probably going to be released. And the argument, well, firstly, you know, for the most part, these people were good people outside. They just unfortunately had these very horrible behaviors that they would go out and exhibit in between. Also, they're not exposed to the victims that they are targeting, that they were targeting outside when they're in prison, because there's not a lot of female warders, and they're also not stupid, and they realize that attacking a female warden in prison is really, really stupid. They're not idiots. So we don't know what makes these people like this very often. So how do we fix them? That's the first problem, even if you had the best services in prison. And then, you know, the fact that they're behaving normally in prison is not a predictor of their external behavior once they're in the community. And, you know, they kind of seem to have this attitude, well, let's give them a second chance. They've been in prison for 15 years. They've been well behaved. They've done a few courses, these one-day courses that you just have to not fall asleep during. But you're giving the victim a first chance of death or rape, and it's just highly irresponsible. And we've seen, as I said, multiple examples now with these people being released and while on parole, reoffending, getting arrested again a second time, and then reoffending a third time when they're on parole. It's like, what are the consequences for correctional services parole boards when these things happen? Because I think if we made the parole boards criminally and civilly liable for the outcomes of their decisions, I think we'd have a lot less people being released on parole.
Definitely. Mash, you've been quiet, but I know you've got lots of questions. Do you want to go ahead and ask something?
Yes, so I actually want to find out. So in terms of the parole boards, the board itself, who decides who's actually on that board? That's actually something I've been meaning to find out as well.
Yeah. So I think it's determined by, I think, the Correctional Services Act that sort of says who can be and who is on it. And then I think like the members of the community they put themselves forward, and then they get selected to be on a particular region's parole board. But as I said, my biggest concern is, you should have, for example, a psychologist on a parole board. You should have a social worker on a parole board. So their argument is, but yes, correctional services psychologists write reports which get given to the parole board. But now you have someone who's not a psychologist trying to understand that report on the board, who reads out, the chairman would read out snippets of the report to the rest of the committee. And then that same chairperson who's not a psychologist might make recommendations back to what kind of therapy the person should get. I mean, let me give you a good one. In the Donovan Woodley hearing that I sat in on, the end of it was, okay, Donovan, you're not going to get parole now. You should redo this course, one or two courses that you've already done. I don't know what the point of that would be. And then you must go for therapy for your love of money. And I'm like, my jaw just hit the table. I'm like, hey, where does this love of money even come up from? And I can imagine the psychologists, who I know lots of them, they typically say to me, we get these bizarre referrals from the parole board for things that we must now do therapy for, which have no basis in reality. So if you at least have a psychologist on the parole board who reads the other psychologist's report and says, this is a good report, this is a bad report, and perhaps we should make recommendations for this type of therapy. It's like me giving an orthopedic surgeon, hey, you must do funny knee surgery for a funny knee. I mean, this guy's going to think, you're a bloody idiot. What do you know about knee surgery? You're not an orthopedic surgeon. Same argument. Yeah. If you're not a psychologist, you shouldn't be recommending therapy. It's just bizarre. And the big kicker is people also think that correctional services know what the offender has done. They don't. It's not like a copy of the police docket goes with them to prison, or a copy of the court record, or even the judgment doesn't go with them. So literally when that person arrives at prison, at the sentence section in correctional services, all they know is that he's been found guilty of 1 times murder. They don't know the substance of that murder. So you look at Oscar Pistorius, that's 1 times murder. You look at Mornay Haramza, who chopped the head off of that, who tried to decapitate that one kid at school and murdered one and allegedly attempted to murder 3 others. He's also 1 times murder. Then you get the Welcome killers who lured that kid to the graveyard, killed him brutally, cut up his body, skinned his face off, kept the body parts at home. That's also 1 times murder. But all 3 of those people have a very, very different risk profile. But you don't know exactly what he's done. So he can spin a snot story to you over the next 10 years and soften the version of how it was that he killed his girlfriend. And And what do you have as a comparison to decide, actually, that's not the truth. We know what this guy did. We know what the judge said. We know what X, Y, and Z. So the starting point is when they get to prisoners, they don't actually know what this guy really, from a substance point of view, actually did.
Who's the scariest person you've ever actually interviewed? Who's the scariest person you've encountered in all of this madness that you deal with? These fringe people, these murderers and serial killers and pedophiles and rapists. And who's the worst and scariest person that you just don't want to see ever again?
Well, look, I mean, you can look at it from the point of view as which one was I personally most scared of interviewing. I would say probably that was, and that was Joseph Pandila Nchongwana from Durban. He decapitated a good few number of people over a couple of days. I think it was in 2013. I think that's in my next book, was my first book. And he was just scary because he was actually an ex-Blue Bulls rugby player. So he was massive. He was absolutely huge. And I was just worried that if this guy gets angry, he can literally put one hand around my neck and squeeze the throttle the life out of me. Luckily, my colleague was with me, and I knew I could run faster than him. So if things did go pear-shaped, I wasn't going to be the first guy grabbed. So he was just scary because he was massively huge and intimidating, and really kind of had a sort of an aggressive look on his face. But I mean, I've interviewed other people who did a million times worse things that I didn't feel scared at all about my personal safety. Like, Stuart Wilkin from Port Elizabeth. I mean, this guy, he killed street children. He killed his own daughter. He killed adult sex workers. He engaged in necrophilia. He engaged in cannibalism. He would sadistically torture his victims while killing them. I mean, he's probably the worst in terms of the spectrum of behavior serial murderer. I mean, I spent 2 days interviewing him in prison, and I didn't, sort of feel at all worried about my personal safety. So and I've had death threats from people who just killed their girlfriend. They didn't. I mean, that's bad enough, but I'm just talking in comparison to all the other stuff that I've seen. And who are sending me death threats, but I've never received a death threat from a serial murderer. So it's kind of this bizarre world where the most horrific people are not necessarily the ones you're the most scared of, and the people who've done something comparatively lesser want to kill you.
You got to see Mash's face in this. He's got like the fear of God put into him. These people that you've met, you've sat opposite. It's horrible, right?
I am terrified. These people sound terrible. And my dad actually works for correctional services, so I've seen some of these people, so I'm even more terrified.
Yeah.
I suppose
the guy who's the true psychopath is the one that you always have to worry about, because they get vindictive and they don't ever change. Psychopaths are psychopaths till the day they die. So if they really don't like you, they're going to not like you for probably forever until they find somebody else that they don't like for some other reason.
Oh my God! All right, is there a way you can pick these people out? I mean, let's just cut to the chase here, because with all your no, don't answer it that quickly. I was hoping you'd have an answer for us, because this is what we all. I think the real reason we watch these shows, I think the real reason we pay attention to these stories is because we're hoping to find a pattern, so we can go, okay, if someone does this, or if someone says this, or someone behaves this way over a prolonged period, they are clearly worth avoiding. And you've already answered it. You said there is no way to tell. You cannot pick out a serial killer or mass murderer or genocidal lunatic from a crowd, right? They blend in with the rest of us. Is that right?
Yeah, and that's the thing. And that 99.9% of their life, they're doing the normal things that we do. They've got a job of some sort. Many of them have a girlfriend. They're very, very normal. And that's, I think, what is so scary. If there were these people who live these criminal lifestyles that you knew, don't go near that guy, he's going to steal your wallet, punch you in the face, do this to you, he's a bad person, he's aggressive, he's rude, that will be easy. And there are people like that. And we tend to sort of avoid those individuals. But these types, the specific that we've been talking about here, they don't live that criminal lifestyle that would even give us a warning that this is just a bad person in general. But having said that, people often say, how do I not become the victim of a serial murderer? Well, in South Africa, most serial murderers are targeting typically unemployed women, and they approach them and offer them a job. From your serial rapists to your serial murderers, like literally 98% of them approach a lady on the street and say, do you want a job? And because you have such a high unemployment rate, you'll find somebody who doesn't, or who wants a better job than the one they've got, understandably so, and will go with this complete stranger and walk with them, get into a taxi, get out of a taxi, and take a shortcut across the veld, and that's where they become the victim of their crime. So the easiest way to avoid becoming the victim of that is don't go alone with a stranger anywhere. And that's probably good advice that we should all be following. But can you pick them out? No. You know, this old-fashioned view that they're torturing animals, setting fire to things, wetting their beds, doing bad things. Yeah, you'll get a tiny percentage of serial murderers who do that, but probably the overwhelming percentage of people who do that are not going to end up becoming serial murderers. They might end up becoming very bad people, but not necessarily serials. So there isn't that easy way to pick out these people. They just live very bland, normal kind of lives. And which is why everybody's always surprised when you arrest so-and-so and they're angry at you for arresting so-and-so because he would never do that. He's such a nice person. Well, you know, we've got his DNA linked to 20 murders and he's confessed. So much for that nice person. That's the reality, unfortunately.
Yeah, I mean, this is what you always see, right? In all of these shows, all the news interviews, when a murder happens like this, the neighbors are like, oh, he was such a nice person. He was so normal. It drives me crazy that we can never get beyond that. And you're here, you're the professional. You're telling us there is no way you could be sure. There's just no way. You could think you're living next door to a saintly, quiet, middle-aged woman, and meanwhile she's boiling someone's head in a pot on her stove, or in an air fryer, as Lebang does. You know, that's what she likes.
You know, even if you look at your more everyday crimes like rape and child molestation, you know, like 75% of those are committed by people you know in your family, in your daily interactional environment, friends of the family. Yes, there is always stranger danger, but you know, we need to be teaching people that you're more likely to be raped or a child to be molested by someone that you hang out and probably drink coffee with and share a meal with than you are by a stranger.
I'm afraid we're going to have to close the conversation on that note. It's there's so much. We could talk to you for days and days and days, Gerard, and I wish you luck with the new book. Please let us know when it's out so we can give it a proper plug and we can have you on the show again. Any excuse to get you back. People have got lots of questions here, and I'm sorry we didn't get to some of those. We tried to throw some of them into the mix this morning, but it's an absolute pleasure to speak to you. You can follow Gerard on his social media. It's at GN Labuschagne. Go and take a look. And you can follow all of the tweets that he's going to put up there, all the latest stories, all the things he's following. It's amazing insights into the parole boards, which I thought Mash's question was really good too. Like, how do we even constitute these things, and who decides who's on the parole board? So many things left unanswered, so many things that we'll leave for the next time we talk to you. Thank you very much for joining us. Thank you for joining us. And Lebang and Mash, we'll see you next week. Lebang, holding thumbs for 3.2 kilograms and growing in your tummy.
Why, thank you very much.